It's been 6 long months since Russia waged a war on Ukraine. Officials and analysts initially assumed that Russia's larger and better equipped military would quickly take over Ukrainian forces. The world thought that Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, would fall within 72 hours of the war.
Все военнослужащие украинской армии, которые выполнят это требование, смогут беспрепятственно покинуть зону боевых действий и вернуться к своим семьям. Еще раз настойчиво подчеркну, вся ответственность за возможное кровопролитие будет целиком и полностью на совести правящего на территории Украины режима. Теперь несколько важных, очень важных слов для тех, у кого может возникнуть соблазн со стороны вмешаться в происходящее событие. Кто бы ни пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались.
But they were all proven wrong. Ukraine fought back hard, and 6 months down the line, they are still standing.
Мы точно знаем, нам не нужна война, ни холодная, ни горячая, ни гибридная. Но если на нас будут наступать войска, если у нас попытаются отнять нашу страну, нашу свободу, наши жизни, жизни наших детей, мы будем защищаться.
And they were not fighting alone. Many countries stepped in to help Ukraine with military aid. Countries like US, UK, France, Netherlands, Germany, Canada, Sweden, Finland, Spain, and many others have sent defense supplies to Ukraine.
On Saturday, my administration authorized another $200 million to keep a steady flow of weapons and ammunition moving to Ukraine. Now I'm once again using my presidential authority to activate an additional security assistance to continue to help Ukraine fend off Russia's assault. An additional $800 million in assistance. That brings the total of new U.S. security assistance to Ukraine to $1 billion just this week.
Now the question arises, is the Russian military and economy as strong as the world assumed? Ukraine's will to continue fighting for the land is a reflection on Russia's military power. Professor Phillips O'Brien of St. Andrews University, Scotland, has said, Ukraine is not even a second-tier military power. It is not as strong as, say, the US or even smaller NATO forces. The war showed they are not able to run complex operations the way the British or French or even Israelis did.
The first Russian strategy was one of the worst strategies in military history. It was a really poorly planned operation based on a wildly optimistic assumption of your own abilities and a wildly underestimate of your opponent. And they spread troops around. It went really poorly. They were knocked back in the Battle of Kiev.
Ukraine has suffered a lot. They saw extensive damage of infrastructure, towns and cities were destroyed, the military saw heavy casualties, and millions were forced to flee the country. Despite that, President Zelensky emerged as a wartime leader who was able to round up his nation to fight back against Russia. Ukraine managed to inflict huge losses on Russia's military, which was forced to retreat from Kyiv and regroup in the east. The war also majorly impacted Russia's economy. A massive economy like Russia has found itself under pressure, especially after many countries imposed sanctions and cut off trade relations. Russia cut back on supplies of natural gas to Europe, which led to a gap in their own economy. As recently as May, the Russian Finance Ministry forecast a 12% contraction in the economy.
По оценкам экспертов, только прямые, счетные потери Евросоюза от санкционной лихорадки за предстоящий год могут превысить $400 миллиардов. Такова цена решения, оторванных от реалий и принятых вопреки здравому смыслу. Вот я говорил о нашей инфляции, но страны еврозоны не проводят никаких специальных военных операций, а инфляция выросла у некоторых до 20%.
Coming to the military aspect, Professor O'Brien said one of the major drawbacks for Russia was that they failed to respond to the 20 long-range HIMARS rocket systems, a 1980s US technology that Ukraine troops used against them. Within Russia, policymakers and advisors said they knew of their military's weakness and the challenges they would face well before the war. Until February 24th, many did not actually believe Putin would pull the trigger on a special military operation.
Now, from what we can tell, the equipment wastage in this phase is going in the Ukrainian favor. I mean, the Russians really have made very few advances. The Ukrainians have pushed them out north of Kharkov. And the general trend in equipment, I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but basically the Ukrainians are much better armed than they were on February 24th because they are getting a lot of NATO-level systems, and the Russians are worse armed. The Russians went in with a lot of their best equipment. They start replacing that equipment, but they're replacing it often with equipment that's not as good. So at least the trend lines, unless Russia, say, fully mobilizes, the trend lines are Ukraine is getting better armed and Russia's getting worse armed.
American military analyst Michael Kaufman, director of Russia studies at CNA, has said Russia was overcounting their military to hide their lack of numbers and their underinvestment in personnel. This was the reason for their underperformance. He also added, as the troops gathered to wage war on Ukraine, the assumption was they had at least 150,000 personnel. But in reality, their force was only as big as 90,000 personnel. The underperformance of Russian air defense raised questions of the quality of their equipment and training of pilots and soldiers that operate them. A study on Russian equipment found that most of the Russian equipment that was destroyed or captured by Ukraine had foreign-made components. Now, with the sanctions imposed, Russia was also left technologically challenged. All these reasons have now weakened the world's impression on the Russian forces. Bordering countries are not threatened by Russia anymore, and Ukraine believes they can eventually win the war.
Кожен новий день – це нова причина не здаватись. Бо пройшовши стільки всього, ми не маємо права не дійти до кінця. Що для нас кінець війни? Раніше ми говорили «мир». Зараз кажемо «перемога».
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to Mirror Now.